G'day, my name's Barry Green, and I'm an independent consultant and co-author of Data Means Business with Jason Foster. And I'm here today to talk to you about building an adaptive data platform. I'm not here to talk about AI, so I must be the only person in this whole place. Okay, so what do I mean by adaptive? So we talk about agility times collaboration equals adaptability. And what do I mean by agility? I don't mean working in an agile fashion. I mean whole body thinking, so brain, gut, ethics, heart, ethics, gut, experience. Also talk about thinking about being adaptive, being agile as using a test and learn approach. So happy to make mistakes. I like to say test and learn, and then do it, see how it works, change it, fast, startup type thinking. So that's what we mean by agility. What do I mean by collaboration? So a lot of people confuse collaboration with cooperation. They're not the same thing. So I'm sure lots of you have experience dealing with politics, pettiness, single-mindedness in different places of the organisation which stops you from doing stuff. To me, that's cooperation. People can say, I'm going to help you do stuff, but often they've got other priorities, they've got other things they want to do. That's not collaboration. So collaboration is when you, your team, and everyone you're delivering for has a single perspective and they understand why they're involved, what they need to do, and why it's important for the entire organisation. Okay? So let's look at the problems that stop those things from happening. Okay, we got it. Ecosystem neglected. What do I mean by that? So I see a lot of people doing use case work, which is great, and I think it's a really good thing, but they're narrowly focused. They don't understand how the use case affects the entire organisation. So the entire business, to me, is an ecosystem. It connects, it's impacted by what happens, and that's really, really important. So you've got to think about the organisation as an ecosystem. Each department is an ecosystem, and they all click together. So you've got to understand how that works. The next problem is technology first. You wouldn't be here today if you didn't like toys, right? You're talking to all these vendors with all this cool new technology, and the problem is we focus too much on the technology before we really understand the ecosystem, and we really start to prioritise the right things that will drive value in the organisation. So technology is important, but we're going to talk about what you need to do before that to understand what your priorities need to be so you're delivering the most value for the organisation. Data capabilities neglected. So we're going to build a whole set of data capabilities. And what I often see is people focusing on, we've got to have a glossary, and we've got to have everything labelled, and it's got to be in the glossary. We've got to have data quality right across the organisation. People focus on single things and don't understand what your data ecosystem needs to look like, how quickly you need to build things so that you're basically building something that can scale quickly when you do need to scale. So these are what I see as the three key problems. So let's start with the first one. So what I like to do is break up the organisation into platforms, so use platform thinking. This may not mirror your organisation structure exactly, and that's fine. But what you're doing is you're building a list of platforms, and you're thinking about all the technologies, including Excel and everything else, that basically are required to deliver for that part of the organisation. So by doing this, you build up an inventory that allows you to think about, when you do go and buy new technology, what features do you need, what do you need to decommission, all these key things that often I see people not doing. So they buy new stuff, never decommission anything. They don't look at features, they just look at a whole product. So we start with drawing this out, and then you'll notice that the data platform is just an enabler, which is why we don't start with the data platform first. So what do we start with? We start with business capabilities. So in their simplest form, I like to think of a business capability as something the organisation needs to produce in order to operate. So take finance, for example. So statutory reporting management, pretty much every organisation needs. Right? You need financial accounts for the regulators, you need financial accounts for the markets, you need management accounting, etc., etc. Right? So that's a business capability, or one business capability for finance. But previously, with all our platforms, you need to go through and create business capabilities and understand how those capabilities are dependent on others. Now, the thing about this is, it doesn't matter, there are rules around how you label this stuff, but the number one thing that's super important is the conversation. Your conversation to understand how the organisation works. Your conversation to understand how the organisation connects. Because so many times people are in their little bubble and they don't understand that what they do impacts everyone else. Or they think that just because I work in the call centre, I don't have any impact on anyone else in the organisation. So it's that whole organisation thinking. You're abstracting everything up to a really high level so you can start to connect the dots in the organisation and understand how it works. You then create a capability map, and that capability map needs to be owned by level 1 and level 2 people in your organisation. So again, it won't necessarily mirror what your organisation structure looks like, but that's super fine, because all you're trying to do is draw an ecosystem up and be able to explain that ecosystem in the organisation. And there's no point in doing this if they sit on the shelf. So I've been in many organisations where they've got business capabilities. I think, fantastic. We're already at a head start. And they don't use them, or they're used only by a small part of the organisation. And that's okay, but you've got to grow them across the organisation. The whole point of having this ecosystem thinking, of having a way to abstract things up to a high enough level that you can explain and people can understand, is that it needs to be across the organisation. It then kind of allows you to have conversations with executives around, I know you're the CEO, mate, but really, if we do this, it's not going to add any value. There's 5 other things over here that are going to add value, and let me explain why that's the case. So this is super important. So I've kind of understood my ecosystem, I've drawn out my platforms, I've created business capabilities, and I'm now ready to start thinking about what I need from my data platform. Right, so the first thing I'm going to start with is my technology principles, and they're pretty basic, and I like to keep everything simple because you can get into detail at any point in time, but if you're going to communicate with anyone in the organisation, simple is best. So the first thing is about scalable architecture. So we've taken a use case approach, and we know we need to build out various capabilities within our platform, but at some point we are going to want to scale, and we want to scale probably quickly. So everything you put in place needs to be able to scale at pace. Fit for purpose data modelling. So everyone needs a relational model, and I remember 10 or so years ago when Hadoop came out, and everyone was saying warehousing is dead. We don't need warehousing anymore. Well, it's still around, and even with AI, it's still probably going to be around, right? So hopefully you haven't built out a model that's really old and retired and you can start from scratch again. But again, when you're building out this model, you need to think about what's next and what's next so that you're thinking about building it out at the right pace, small enough to deliver value super quick. So I'll give you an example. I was in an organisation that had 150 data elements across 20 tables. They needed 5, right? They didn't break the tables up. They didn't take away the 145 attributes they didn't need. And then they started complaining that technology was poor because it was taking too long to run. Go figure. Data ops and AI ops. So I see a lot of people doing something quickly, but not thinking about how to automate it, how to measure it, and how to put it into production so that it can be scaled. Now, if you do this later, it generally creates problems. So you need to think about it as part of your overall solution. You don't have to over-engineer it, but you have to do it. So we also like to think about things in terms of products. So scalable and reusable products. So you can create things faster by reusing what you already have and not creating 27 of the same thing in a slightly variant form. Flexible data access is super important. And in one organisation, we built a model for data access that we then started to roll out across the rest of the organisation. So how many people in here have got, I don't know, lots of systems with thousands of roles, right? Thousands. It's a nightmare to manage, and it basically needs to be fixed up at some point. As you start to build this platform out, you've got an opportunity to innovate and then roll that across the organisation, across other platforms and systems. And last of all, innovation. You've got to have some place that's safe, that has boundary conditions for innovation, and you can then productionize it. Because you don't want your executives arguing about how they measure something because some idiot has decided to create something and then throw it across the organisation as gospel. Because that happens a lot and it causes lots of friction and lots of confusion. So what do we do now is we think about the layers we want to put into our data platform. And what we're doing here is, again, we're abstracting everything up. And again, it doesn't matter how you label these things. What matters is you and your team understand it and you can explain it simply to the rest of the organisation. So for example, business data model has nothing to do with relational data models. It's there because it has capabilities against it that are focused purely on everyone else in the organisation. How they describe something, how they think about something, what metadata is important to them. So it's a whole lot of what I would call functional analysis that happens. But it's called business data model because effectively it's how the business thinks about their organisation. Data management, it's pretty simple and we'll get to that. Now data integration, super important. Data sources. This could be internal sources and external sources. It's all sources in your organisation and that you need to create products. Your data layer is where all the heavy lifting takes place, and you'll see that when we get to the kind of framework for where all our capabilities sit. Smart data services is effectively things that you have built to support operating the business, things that add value to the business, things you can configure and give out to the business. So they're effectively, they're products that you can deliver, and they're nicely packaged in a part of the platform. Data provisioning is an obvious thing you need. It's about, if you're going to clean your data, if you're going to define the things that are important, you need a really smart way, usually using APIs, to effectively take that data, move it internally and externally without duplicating too much. So that needs to be built as well. Now, search and consume is what I call a data supermarket. So think about when you walk into a supermarket and you want to buy Marmite. So you kind of know where it sits in the supermarket. You go to yes, that's where it is, probably be in here somewhere. You walk down, you find the Marmite, there's 10 different types. It's labelled, you know which type is which. You know how big they are because they've got all the labelling on them. That's kind of what you want for your data. It's kind of what you want for your data products. It's what you want for your AI services. So effectively your search and consume is somewhere where people can easily find the things that are productionized, the things that are gospel, the things that help the organisation understand and make decisions. Whoa. Okay, so we've got an empty data platform. We're going to start with our number one business capability. So level 1 business capability, data and information management. I'm then going to put my layers over that, and I've defined what these layers mean, and they all connect. You cannot do something in here without impacting other layers. Now then we put the second layer of capabilities in, and you'll notice that I haven't got capabilities against every single layer. That's fine. Data management has capabilities across the layers. So for example, under business data model, I've got reference data, I've got functional analysis, and you'll see I've got ontology engineering when I eventually click the next button. Right, you could argue that I could put master data management in there, but my thinking was reference data is relatively easy to implement. You can do it a lot smaller than master data, so I left it in data management because there's some serious heavy lifting if you want to do master data management properly. I then add the rest of my capabilities, and I now have a fully functioning data platform that does absolutely nothing because I haven't put the technology in place yet. But I thought about what I need. I understand when someone tells me what business capabilities they need, and I can look at this and say, right, I need to build this. I only need this to a small scale. I need this quite robust, and I can start to plan effectively how to build this out. I'm going to label everything. I should have just done one click, really. So now anyone should be able to look at this and understand how it works. So my layers have business capabilities over the top, and everything connects. So what now? What am I doing now? Okay. So in the book we talk about something called the level up framework, and it's a super simple way to kind of gap what's going on. There's 5 layers, so from establish all the way up to optimize. But here I've only used the first 3 because we're only just starting out. And then what I've done is I've taken a layer, I've taken the data capabilities that we actually have done something within the organisation, and I've red, amber, greened it. Then I've put a very, very simple description of what's needed, and I want to go around the organisation and I want to talk to them about what I'm planning, why it's important, and how it will enable value to be created through solving some of their issues in the organisation. And the Harvey balls are a super nice way to effectively look at this and say, right, starting with nothing, in 1 year I'm going to move to this, or 6 months, it doesn't really matter. Whatever pace you need to move at in your organisation. The other thing you can do here is you can abstract this lower and lower. So instead of using data management, you could potentially use this for just data quality. And again, create simple language, what you're going to do. But you need to start at the top level first, slowly work your way down. Otherwise you can get lost in the detail and start confusing everyone, including yourself. So why is this important? Why do we want to start with business capabilities instead of just jumping into the technology? Because we need to align value, and the only way you really find value is by understanding what things the organisation needs to create more money, or be more efficient, or make employees happier. And you don't understand that by building a data platform. It's strategic, and it's modular, and you can create it from the top down at your pace. But it also helps you clarify your thinking and then explain your thinking to the rest of the organisation. And again, it's really about making sure people understand why you're doing the things you're doing and how it helps them, or how it helps the organisation. Because to me, you should be thinking organisation first, department second, my team third, in simple language, right? It helps you think about the critical path and the patterns in the organisation as you build things out. It helps you think about what's broken Because a lot of time when you're talking to people and then you talk to other people in the organisation, something kind of resonates and you go, wait a second, I just spoke to Jill and she told me this is really bad. And this guy's telling me this thing's perfect and the process works amazingly. So you can start to connect people in the organisation as well and start to then help prioritise what you fix. Connects the ecosystem. So if you remember at the start, we talked about understanding the ecosystem, understanding what the problems are, thinking about how you're going to fix that, and then building your platform. By doing this, you're creating a commercially driven data platform that is always moving and adapting to solve the relevant problems in the organisation. The last thing is culture. I've talked about communication, delivering simple messages, understanding how the ecosystem connects. This is why you need to do this, and the way of doing this, I said, you don't start with what the platform looks like, you don't start with the technology, you start with the conversation. And you start with helping people to understand why what they're telling you doesn't make sense before you start telling them how you're going to fix it. Now, I'm actually super early, so is there any questions? No questions? So I'm super clear? And everyone loves it? All right, okay, I'm done.